This is an interview with John Franklin Easley. He was born in Rush County, Texas, on May the 13th, 1872. Mr. Easley, can you tell me in what year you moved to Oklahoma?
Well, I moved to Indian Territory in the year 1887 when I was 15 years old.
And from where did you move?
I came from Jack County, Texas, with my parents and their family. Their entire family moved to Indian Territory, crossed Red River in a covered wagon. We made the entire trip in a covered wagon and brought a few milk cattle trailing along behind the wagon. We had a cowboy with us to direct us on the trip, to help with the cattle, and especially to help us cross Red River. We forded the river at that time. There were very few ferries and no bridges on Red River at that time. We crossed the river near Rock Crossing and stopped at Leon, which is now in Love County, near Red River, about 35 miles southwest of Ardmore.
Did you encounter any dangers on your trip? I mean, like quicksand or anything when crossing the Red River?
Well, we didn't have any trouble crossing the river, but we had to keep moving to keep from sinking.
You did?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the social events that around this time when you first moved here, what you did for enjoyment in your spare time?
Well, the young people had dances in this country. They did square dancing and going to church, and they'd have a few little parties. There were not much social activities in this country at that time. It was a very new country, and the people were very poor that came over.
And
as a rule, the people were very poor that came to Indian Territory because they were attracted by the opportunity to get lands.
Can you tell me a little bit about the law at this time and how it was enforced here?
Yes, we had the statutes of the state of Arkansas were extended over Indian Territory in 1887. And those were the statutes that we lived under at that time, and they were enforced not by county officers elected by the people, as they were in Arkansas, but they were enforced by the United States deputy marshals. And we had fairly good observance of law.
Can you tell me, has there been a change in the climatic conditions from then to now?
I think the climatic condition has grown drier and hotter since that time.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about the difference in dress?
The difference in dress? Well, I think I'd be the wrong one to ask about that, but people in Indian Territory wore about what they could get in 1887. And at this time, of course, they can buy any kind of clothing they want because the conditions have improved so much. But the situation was...
it was just about it wasn't too much different then.
Is there something wrong with it?
That's what I think.
Go ahead, talk.
Okay. Can you tell me how you became interested in the newspaper business?
Yes, sir. I moved to Ardmore in 1896, and I taught a school. And I rented a house and paid rent on it 3 months, And at the end of that time, I moved into a small home of my own that I'd built. And I agreed to pay it out in small monthly payments. And at the end of my school, I felt like I had to be employed for the summer. And because I wanted to meet payments on my house, and besides, I had to live. And I went to work to hunt a job as soon as school was out, and I found a job on the Daily Ardenrite.
So that's how you came about working there?
Yes, it wasn't a choice with me. I was going to work anywhere I could make a piece of money.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me some unusual incidents pertaining to the newspaper business when you were working there? Some unusual things that happened?
Well,
you can't remember any, when you were getting a story or anything that was unusual?
Well, I didn't get any stories much, but Colonel Sidney Suggs purchased the Ardenrite June 18, 1897, and I had just been working on the paper 3 days when he purchased it. And I wondered and wondered whether he'd take me over with the paper. But he did, and I held my place and went right on with the same job as if nothing had happened.
Oh, I see.
And Colonel Sidney Suggs owned the paper for a period of 20 years. And I was with him all during that time. Except possibly 6 months or to a year before he sold out.
Well, can you tell me the average salaries paid to a newspaper man when at the time when you started working?
Well, now, I don't know about how much newspaper men received, but I know I received very little pay, and I know how much printers received. Printers got $9 a week at that time.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell me the method of communication for world coverage in the newspaper business?
Well, now, we didn't have any world coverage on our paper. It was a 4-page daily published in a little town, and there was no coverage of news. We got a man to call us up from Fort Worth and read us the headlines of the papers in Fort Worth, and for outside news, and besides that, well, we just clipped from other papers, Dallas News and Fort Worth Record and Star Telegram of Fort Worth.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me the method of delivery of newspapers? Did you deliver them like we do now?
Yeah, we delivered them on horseback.
Oh, you did?
Yes, we had, when I began on the paper, they had 2 boys. One worked south of Main Street, and one worked north of Main Street, and delivered papers to the homes on horseback. And I delivered myself the Main Street route.
Oh, you did. What was the percentage of the subscribers when you started working with the Ardenrite? About how many people took the Ardenrite?
Well, there were very few persons in this country took a daily paper when the Daily Ardenrite was started in 1893. There are few persons outside of Ardmore that took it, and only a part of the population in Ardmore. I don't remember how many papers was published today, but I wouldn't think there's 1,000, as many as 1,000 gotten out.
Well, how much did the Ardmore cost for, let's say...
How much did the people pay for it?
For
The people paid 50 cents a month for the paper delivered.
Mm-hmm. And, you see, what was the approximate population of Ardmore when you moved here?
I have an idea. Ardmore was a city of about 5,000 persons, I believe, when I moved here.
5,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Was Ardmore a peaceful town?
Was Ardmore a peaceful town? Well, to many persons it was when they moved in here and attended to their own business and work while they were all let alone. They had peaceful times of their own, but there were many killings in this country through Ardmore and the sections surrounding it. And then when statehood came, there was a time that old scores were settled, and it seemed like they were not afraid to kill. They didn't know whether it was under Arkansas law or whether it was under Oklahoma law, and there were old scores were settled up, and there were dozens of killings in this section. The courts were full of trials, of murder trials, for years and years after statehood, settling those things off. And there's always been a time in this country when a man could get killed if he wanted to, because there was always somebody ready to fight. Mm-hmm. And the hiring of killers was prevalent in those days. And $500 was the price set for the killing of a man. Fellow that got stubborn and wouldn't cooperate, some fellow determined to get him out of the way, he just paid a killer $500 to do the job.
Well, can you tell me about the social life in Ardmore?
The social life in Ardmore was very good. There was a nice bunch of young people here, young men and young women. And the first social organization, I believe, was the Algonquin Club. And all the young people belonged to this club, and they had their dances and their parties. And after a while, that was succeeded by the Elks Club. And the Elks Club reigned here for a number of years as a social center of the city. Now, people were well-dressed, well-behaved, and they didn't partake of this Indian Territory bad stuff at all. They were nice folks, well-dressed, well cared for.
Can you tell me about the water supply in Ardmore?
Water was supplied from wells at the homes. Now, for public supply of water, there was some wells dug in the middle of Main Street, but that was for the main purpose of fighting fire.
Mm-hmm. And was there a sewage system in Ardmore?
There was not until after the city was organized, and it is after the beginning of the century when they had a water system here and a sewage system.
Are there any political leaders that you can remember from Ardmore?
Well, Ardmore had the biggest bunch of lawyers of any city in the state. We had 100 lawyers, and among them were some of the top men of this country, great orators and great criminal lawyers. And out of the bunch, we elected one governor, Lee Cruz.
Mm-hmm. And
others served on as justices of the Supreme Court.
What kind of medical assistance did you have in Ardmore?
We had a good corps of doctors in this town, the finest men in the world, and they were devoted to their professions, and honorable in their professions, and the people had good medical service in Ardmore.
Did you have a hospital?
Well, Dr. Walter Hardy and Dr. R.H. Henry and Dr. F.P. Von Keller put in a hospital in the early days at the corner of Main and Caddo Street, and Dr. J.C. McNeese was in on that hospital too. And that was the beginning of the Hardy Hospital that was afterward moved up to First Avenue Southwest and B Street.
Mm-hmm. What made how did people make a living in Ardmore?
Well, there were no industries in Ardmore at that time. Most of the money was made out on the farms, and this was always a good cattle country, and many cattle were here, and farmers could raise oats and bring them into town to sell them to men that kept horses for their buggies and their hacks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's done away with at this time. That market's done away with because people do not keep horses.
When was oil first discovered?
In August of 1913, the Hazen field was discovered.
I see. And what changes came to Ardmore from the oil boom?
Well, the greatest changes in the world. The streets were cleaned up, and business fronts were added to the buildings, and Ardmore began to take on a different appearance. Some new hotels sprang up, and people were offered better accommodations.
What part did the Ardmore people have in developing the oil field? Did they have a part in developing?
Yes, they did. It was the greatest field that was ever discovered for local people. It was owned almost exclusively by local people, and local people organized the company that made the discovery. That was done by Roy M. Johnson, who was the leader of that group, and he was assisted by Wirt Franklin, Sam A. Apple, Eric Dunlap, and a few men like that.
How did you get to become owner of the Ardmore, Mr. Easley?
Well, the Daily Ardmore had been owned by Colonel Sidney Suggs for a period of 20 years, and he sold it out to a group of oil men, and they owned it a couple of years, and at the end of that time they were tired of running a newspaper, and they called me in and asked me if I would like to have the management of the Daily Ardmore. And I told them I most assuredly would. And then they said that they would give me an opportunity to own the stock of the company by taking the earnings of the paper and paying them their money back with 8% interest from the time the investment was made until they received their pay for their stock.
Well, can you tell me about how you had to pay off quite a few debts, didn't you?
Yeah, the paper was in rather bad, but not so bad. It owed local banks and a few paper bills and ink bills, but I took the paper June 5, 1919, and it was rather dormant all during the summer, yet it paid its wages. Nobody did a day's work for the paper that didn't receive their pay for it when it was due. But in September, the paper began to make money, and these local debts, and I believe about all the debts out over the country, were paid in 6 months' time after the Ardmore began to earn money.
Well, were there any other newspapers in Ardmore that were in competition with your Ardmore?
Well, at different times, there were some healthy papers published here. The Ardmore Morning Democrat and was one of them. Roy M. Johnson owned a small paper, weekly paper, the Ardmore Statesman. It was a cleverly edited paper and well gotten out. Mr. Johnson was a very fine printer in his day.
Can you tell me about the fire of 1895, I believe?
Well, there was a fire started in a livery stable on Caddo Street, April 19, 1895, and it swept almost the entire town. But it brought to Ardmore a much better set of buildings. The little plank buildings were succeeded by brick buildings and made the town look much better after the fire had occurred.
Well, was there a fire department when that fire was started?
I wasn't here at that time, but Ardmore's always had a fire department, but it never had a department that could cope with any fire like that because they didn't have any water.
Oh, I see. And
They ran with buckets and fought as best they could. They had a volunteer fire company, and they had some equipment. They had some hose to put in these wells, but the wells were very quickly exhausted, and it's almost like there was no fire. They dynamited buildings to stop the fire at places.
can you tell me about the explosion in Ardmore?
This explosion occurred September 27, 1915, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There was a tank car on the Santa Fe tracks right close to Main Street that became heated by the sun, and it gave off a gas that escaped all over this town, and it reached out to where there was fire somewhere. In fact, there was a paving district on the tracks of the Santa Fe at that time where there were fires burning. Could have started from that. But there was a tremendous explosion that broke windows for 14 blocks away and was heard for a distance of 35 miles. It killed 50 persons and destroyed $1 million worth of property.
Well, who paid for the rebuilding of Ardmore after the explosion?
The Santa Fe Railroad Company.
They did. Can you tell me the story about how the Indians got their education?
The Indian schools, supported by tribal funds, were a set of good schools. Bloomfield Academy, located near Durant, was one of them. And there was other schools near Tishomingo and Hugo and Muskogee And these schools were in competent hands, good teachers, and they turned out a class of men and women that were well educated for that time.
This is Diane Shower, senior in Ardmore High School, March the 3rd, 1956, interviewing John Franklin Easley at his home in Ardmore, Oklahoma.